So thanks everybody for joining. My name is Echo. I'm located here in the US. I've had the great privilege of working with a group of engineers basically from Meraki. So how this started is a number of Meraki employees were interested in becoming instructors in Cisco Networking Academy to be able to work on apprenticeships and teaching the students and different people that were coming in for apprenticeships. I realized very quickly that all the people that I were working with were Netacad students and had different journeys on how they became part of Meraki and became a network engineer, all starting from the student perspective. And so I voluntold them. That's kind of a joke. That's what we say around here when you're voluntold to do something. But they jumped on the chance to be able to share their journeys with you. And I thought you could find some inspiration and some different things in here that might align with what you're seeing. They have some great feedback on what worked for them, what didn't, what were some of the challenges. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass our first presenter the ball. And Matt, that will be you. So you should now have the ball. To forward the slides, if you hover over on the left-hand side of the screen, you should see kind of a 0-1 with an up arrow and down arrow, and you can follow slides from there. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Well, yeah, thank you, Echo, and thank you everyone for joining in on today's session. Really giving myself and my colleagues an opportunity to share a little bit about our story, where we came from and where we're at today. So with that, we'll go and get started. So of course, I'm Matt Gaskin. I'm a network engineer here at Cisco Meraki. I've been at Meraki for about 2.5 years now, and truthfully, it's really my first job out of college. So I'm coming in directly from the Netacad courses and really jumping into the industry and the field as we know it. So a quick bit of backstory, kind of as Echo mentioned there. We really came into this opportunity or have this opportunity in front of us today because we're starting a new program at Meraki where we're teaching interns networking. You know, they're generally speaking, IT students don't really have a path or focus into networking specifically, as many of us who are in the field didn't. So we're really going through this opportunity, and it's a first time around through the program. So myself and my other colleagues here today are being certified as instructors. So it's really cool to see both sides of the fence in such a short amount of time. And really in that program, you know, when I was interviewing for the job, I was asked, why do you want to be a part of this? Like, why is this important to you? And my immediate reaction is kind of what I was just alluding to. I was just on the other side of the fence not so long ago, so I feel like I have a really cool perspective and was on both of those different sides of the field there as a student and now an instructor. So hopefully you'll relate to my story a little bit. Maybe you'll take some inspiration or some constructive feedback away from it. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into it. So we're going to look through a high-level overview of my story, really starting from a student when I was beginning the networking journey, starting in Netacad and going through the paces there. Then how I journeyed over to becoming a network support engineer here at Meraki, and what my day-to-day looks like a little bit and how I use those skills in a practical sense. And then, of course, how Netacad helped to bridge that gap a little bit and take me from a student into a, I guess, industry professional at this point. So, you know, based on the slides, it looks pretty simple. You know, you just trade out the graduation cap for a headset and you're good to go. But there's a little bit more to the story than just that. So we'll kind of take a deep dive into each one of these sections in the time frame that we have and really shed some light on a little bit about my journey. So, well, it looks like my slide got messed up a little bit there, but it basically says my path into networking. So this is the beginning phases of how I really ended up into the networking industry. So like I alluded to before, I didn't really have any idea that I wanted to go into networking specifically. Like I think a lot of people in this field, you know, definitely interested in technology. I love to play around with technology and kind of get to know more. But I never really had a specific intention in mind with going into computer networking. So it really came down to an introduction by a family friend. I was kind of at the point of high school where I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with my life. And I was pointed in the direction of a local community college by a family friend who mentioned that the college had a really great networking program. The instructors had really great reviews, and the industry, of course, was rapidly growing and seemed to be quite a great field to go into. So it looks like a great future plan. And I really had no idea what I was getting myself into when I started that. So I remember in college, you know, when you first start your first or second semester, everyone's asking like, oh, what are you doing? What are you studying? What's your focus? And I even had a hard time explaining to non-technical people outside my class, what I was actually studying or doing, or how this fit into the bigger picture. So definitely really green when it came to that front. Didn't understand very much about it. So kind of really starting from scratch. But I remember joining into the Netacad program, listening to my first lecture by my instructor, and really hearing the depth and the really detail, just the knowledge that they had. He was kind of, you know, flexing his knowledge on us a little bit, starting off in those first few weeks, and I really kind of took the approach of like, wow, that guy knows what he's talking about. You know, I want to be like that guy and just have so much knowledge under my belt. So that's kind of where my initial journey began. And I found with networking, you know, the more that I learned, the more that I wanted to know. So kind of building on top of each other. As soon as I started to learn about topics, I wanted to just keep digging deeper and deeper, and it became more interesting as I went along. So really driving through that and keeping the train rolling as I learned more, I kind of kept getting sucked in further and further. And what I realized quickly is that networking is as wide as it is deep. So there is so much different information to cover across, you know, various different technologies and fields. But there's also a very deep silo that you can go into. I guess the rabbit hole is probably the phrase for it. With each one of these specifically, you know, even the technology piece of this, looking at all these degrees and all these different focuses, that's kind of technology overall, right? Like you have so many paths that you're met with. But then you get into networking and it's even more of the same thing, just more of a specialized sense. So I kept diving further and further deeper into that, and really enjoying, you know, the process of just gaining knowledge and it becoming more cumulative. And then of course, I always saw that networking was kind of on the cutting edge of technology, you know, with things like IoT or cloud computing. Now everything is running on the network, everything has this backplane. So definitely a great field from that sense, where it was always progressing and there's always something new to learn. So taking us further, again, apologize about the title slide there. But I wanted to kind of go over the pillars of Netacad and how I think that kind of set me up for success. You know, looking back at this at a high level, hopefully this helps to understand the key takeaways and at least my most important things to get out of the program, and understanding the structure a little bit more so you can know what you're looking out for along the way. So of course, as much of you know, if you've been through the program, there's the foundational knowledge. You know, there's no getting around that when learning anything new. There is a great deal of material inside the program. It covers topics very deeply and always kind of focusing on a more practical use case of it. And it seems to increase in complexity over time, right? Kind of as I mentioned before, you got to start with the basics and then you can build on more interesting and I guess more fun material. And then of course, along those same lines, I mean, you have the videos and the resources and the slides, all the extra, I guess, supplemental learning tools outside of just the material that really help to reinforce this and drive it home. And honestly, I mean, that's still a study technique that I use to this day of introducing a topic with like a video or a PowerPoint or kind of a talk on a material before I really dig deep into it. Then probably the biggest takeaway that I still use on a day-to-day is the practical experience to get through it. So of course, packet tracer activities are definitely known to everyone through the Netacad program. I mean, it's a tool specifically for it. And while a lot of those can seem outlandish at times, you know, I promise you that those situations do arise where, you know, you got a lab where it says like a junior network engineer has been tasked with configuring these VLANs by their manager and they're under a deadline or whatever it may be. But being in support now, helping customers in those exact same situations, I thought it was kind of funny going back through this course the second time and seeing like, oh, I thought these were kind of silly, but it actually really happens. Those are situations that are applicable in the real world. My college was fortunate enough to have a physical lab, which was really helpful for me, getting to see hands-on with the material itself. And it even, you know, kind of inspired me to build a little mini lab of my own, acquiring some old routers and switches in my, you know, own house. So kind of bridging that gap as well. And then of course, kind of like I mentioned before, the real world troubleshooting scenarios, throwing into the fire of a problem and trying to solve it is pretty much what I do on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of those labs and material that covers that really hits close to home and is a great preparation. And then finally, the professional and career development. I mean, there's a lot of tools just even outside of what's mentioned on the slide here. I mean, you have all this stuff along the lines of the talent bridge. But what I thought was really cool, even looking back on it, was the professional connections that I got through the program, really with classmates and with my teachers, because everyone was either in the field or wanting to get in the field. So really helps expand a professional network from nothing, starting out going to college. And I remember a lot of the times with the other classmates, we would kind of a community of everyone helping each other out. So like people will go out for interviews, right? They come back, tell us what went well, what definitely didn't go well, and try to help everyone really learn from that experience. And then even more so, you know, kind of kicking recommendations over. Like if I was interviewing for something and it turned out to be full time and I couldn't do that because I was in school, I would tell one of my other colleagues, and you know, maybe they go interview. So really just building each other up in your professional network there. And then of course the certifications and professional development, such as this, I guess, would fall under that umbrella. But you know, being able to have Cisco vouch for your knowledge and actually give you the seal of approval that yes, you know this material and pass this test is really valuable in the industry. You know, they're kind of recognized there across any different company or vendor. So that kind of takes us into where we are today. And as I've kind of been mentioning throughout the slide deck here, this is really how my learning and my, I guess, education came to fruition. You know, understanding and learning all this material is great, but what you actually do with it is even better. So my job kind of breaks down into two fundamental categories. I think they all can kind of fall under one of these buckets. So of course there's the education piece, and this can be anything from, you know, teaching customers about new or existing features or products. It could be explaining best practices on how to use our equipment the best and prepare yourself or set yourself up for success. It could be educating colleagues, just trying to share knowledge that you gained along the way, or maybe something they know that you don't know, helping lift everyone up. There's creating documentation, which is a really big part. If you know something, try and share it with either the greater Meraki community or the internal Meraki community to help everyone kind of get on the same page. And then situations like this, you know, training either new hires or going through like an intern program to really share your knowledge with others. And I think that education is a really important piece of this job role, and one of my favorites, because you don't really know what you understand until you try to teach it to someone else. Really quickly, you'll understand your knowledge gaps and where you're lacking. So you can help yourself figure out what you're missing, as well as helping another person kind of lift them up and bring them to a greater knowledge level. So helps on both sides of the spectrum there. And then, as you could have probably guessed, being a network engineer, a lot of troubleshooting. So works off the fundamentals that you are taught in Netacad, the real world situation and the labs that throw you into the fire of trying to understand something really come to fruition when you're on the phone and you have a similar experience as you do in the labs themselves, where it's a junior network engineer that's trying to configure something that needs help and is on a deadline, and then you can actually help them through it. It's a really great feeling there. And you know, troubleshooting is a great part of the job and just a great part of the industry overall, because it's kind of like solving a puzzle. You know, you get that same feeling of just satisfaction and the moment of clarity, if you will, when that last piece sticks into place. Everything that you've been discussing so far makes sense. Everything falls into place, and it's really pretty rewarding, you know, career and job there. So that's kind of a high level of what I do on the day-to-day. Really a 40,000-foot view of it. And with that, you know, kind of coming to my advice, like I said, looking back on Netacad from a instructor standpoint now, when just a few years ago I was in the student standpoint. And there's a few takeaways that I have looking at this material. So as everyone knows, I mean, there's a lot that's covered in the program. Definitely don't sweat the small stuff, and don't be discouraged if you don't get everything right off the bat. I mean, I still don't think I could read through the curriculum and just understand everything or have everything committed to memory right away. There's a lot to go through. So like I mentioned before, focus on grasping really the big concepts, so you don't get to the end of the semester like me and be like, oh man, I didn't actually understand that, and now I'm trying to build on something I don't understand, and the house comes crashing down, and you have to start from scratch. So focus on grasping the fundamentals as you go through, and things will start to fall into place. Another one is definitely take advantage of the packet tracer labs and practical activities. Take time to poke around and really see what they have to offer, you know, even outside of the direct classwork there. You can challenge yourself to kind of bang your head against the wall for a little bit, I guess, to put it bluntly, before reaching out for help, just to see where you can get, and take it one step further. When you want to ask for help, take 5 or 10 more minutes more and see if you can get a more pointy question or a more direct ask of what you need help with. Really, I mean, still something I do to this day when reaching out for help, because still need help a lot, as everyone does. And then, follow what interests you. So you'll be drawn to certain topics naturally. There's a lot of cool stuff covered in the program, even in the later classes. Again, once you get the foundational knowledge down, you get to dig into some of the cool stuff and really cutting edge stuff. Just don't be afraid to go down the rabbit hole every once in a while. And I say that with pause, because you definitely want to know when you're going too far off the track. Listening to 3 or 4 hours of YouTube videos on some topic that really you were interested in might not get you to the exact place you need to be, but to an extent, go down that rabbit trail, try to follow what interests you, and you'll be really surprised when that little bit of knowledge comes in when you really least expect it. And that's kind of my reflection and the look back upon my journey. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity. Hopefully this was a little bit reassuring and encouraging, help shed some light on what this sets you up for. And with that, I think I'm back to you, Echo.
Hi, my name is Josh Blank. I'm one of the team leads here at Cisco Meraki, and I've been with Meraki for nearly 5 years, holding multiple roles across the 2 US-based offices. I started out in San Francisco as a network support engineer, just like Matt, where I helped to support and deploy our 4 main product lines with our customers. From there, I worked to build and develop our intern program. I was the support intern program lead for about 1.5 years. I loved helping engineers early in their career, so help set up goals and guide them through some of the more confusing or stressful times of their lives. After that is when I transitioned back to the Midwest, where I became a team lead at the Chicago office. None of this really would have been possible without going through the Netacad program, taught by my professors and such in university. How I got into that Netacad program, I started out in high school, like most, not really knowing what direction or path to take, but knowing I really love technology. I quickly realized that I should probably get into all the computer classes possible. So I did that, started talking to my teacher at that time, and figuring out what path outside of school in technology I should go into. From there, I realized computer programming and computer science was not my forte or not my skill set. So I looked at the network management side. Once I started looking there, I looked to work with our district's IT department. We had just started rolling out laptops for every student, and I was the one re-imaging, doing warranty calls, and doing asset management and tracking for all of that hardware. Nowadays, that doesn't sound that appealing, but back at 17, 18 years old, that was about the coolest job I could have found, and it was in the field that I really wanted to be in. From there, I started my journey towards university. I went to University of Wisconsin-Stout to get a degree in information technology management. All of this was still very fresh and very new to me. And I started off in, at that time, IC&D 1, learning about frames, packets, router switches, and just getting the network fundamentals down. This was all still very new and very fresh and can be overwhelming, but it was such a great experience to get thrown right into the middle of it and just be immersed in all the technology. I can still remember the first day of classes when we walked into the lab and I saw all the routers and all the switches and all the racks next to the desks, and just knowing that that was something we would get to touch and power on. And boy, when we powered those on for the first time, it was crazy. The volume coming out of the racks was eye-opening at that time. We were really fortunate to have 99% of the hardware supplied during school. So yes, we had the routers, we had the switches, we also had access points and wireless LAN controllers and ASAs available to go through all the different courses and get our hands on and get that hands-on experience with all those different devices. I also remember those late nights in those labs working to finish final exam prep and prepare for each possible solution and situation that the professor would throw at us. It always happened that we'd always get something new or something fresh thrown at us when it came the exam time, but we were at least somewhat prepared. Some things I wish I would have told myself as a student or known as a student was I really wish I would have gone ahead and slowed down and savored all of that information. Reading through all those textbooks and deep diving into all the different packets and all the different captures and all the different diagrams, going ahead and just taking a step back and making sure you digest all of that information is going to be very key. Those are things that you are going to use on a day-to-day basis. I go ahead and I deep dive into Wireshark captures. I deep dive into logs. I deep dive into RFCs just to ensure all of our products are operating within the spec and within the standards. As you grow, also never forget to stick to your roots or never lose your roots. So what I mean by that is don't forget those core networking fundamentals that you learn day one or course one. These are going to be key, and you're just going to build on top of those. So when you have that good foundation, you have that good solid foundation to a house, the top can be added on and added on and added on. Keep that foundation. I go ahead and I pull from that core foundation so frequently to help guide and coach others on their next journey or on through their next case. It also helps in those pressure situations when you can rely on that foundation and that foundational knowledge to get you through those pressure situations we all find ourselves in our IT careers. Lastly, two things that I would say don't ever lose throughout your career as an IT professional is don't ever lose your curiosity and your creativity. Your curiosity will continue you down a path of furthering knowledge and finding new challenges. I found that whenever you get stumped or struggle on an issue, it is time to take that as your next challenge and become the master of that topic. I've done this multiple times myself and taking on those new challenges and new topics just so that I can then go ahead and use those skills for the future. The second part is never stop being creative. IT is as much a science as it is an art, and your ability to find creative and unique solutions is one of the best tools you can have. I myself use this one daily, working with customers who have limited resources and need creative solutions to solve their complex issues without taking up too much of their valuable time and money. So going ahead and finding a good workaround for them or finding a new path to solve the same problem that they were looking to do is definitely key. So thank you. The majority of that is go ahead and be curious and keep being creative and go ahead and create great networks. Thank you.
Hello, Netacad students and instructors. Thank you for listening to my Netacad journey here. Let me share my screen. My name is Dom Wilkins. I am a network support manager here at Cisco Meraki, and I'm actually a pretty new manager. I just started the November of 2020. So it's been a nice journey, a nice transition from my lead and previous engineer position. And today I want to talk to you more about my Netacad journey that led me to this point. The experience differs for every person, and I really think it's important to see how those events lead in and lead up to one another. My journey starts from a really early memory of seeing my high school's PC hardware class. I was in a graphic design class at the time, and on my way to lunch, I would pass by the class which had inside windows, right, conveniently placed for you to see exactly what was going on inside the class. Um, but they were each working on computers, so you really couldn't see what they were doing at the early part or mid part of the year. Towards the end of the year, though, I actually saw them working on computers and building them from scratch. they had a full capstone process where they would go through understanding what a client's requirements were for the PC that they wanted, and going to research the parts and looking up compatibility of those parts, and towards the end, right, actually building the computer from scratch. So each person actually had that as a project, and they were able to do that individually. That really made me interested in just jumping into what was the large space of computers and computer networking. Being in that graphic design class that I was, I didn't know if graphic design is what I wanted to do, and I was also thinking about potentially going into construction. Which, looking back on it now, I'm glad that I found my space into computers and computer networking. I didn't know it at the time, but that PC hardware class was actually a prerequisite for the Cisco Netacad course that my high school was running at the time. They were the only high school in the state, or at least the county, that was running Cisco Netacad courses. In the state, there may have been one other class, but it was at a time where Netacad was still trying to take off across America, even across the world, to be honest. The Netacad course was divided into like a networking fundamentals, CCNA fundamentals type course, and then a small business to enterprise course, and that's how they split it up across the junior and senior year of my high school. I even remember back at a parent-teacher night where my teacher, her name was Linda O'Neill, had a slideshow up, and it was on one of the slides that compared the salaries for network engineers and other positions. And that was just good for my mom to see, right? The career that I was going into. Of course, I was happy to see that. Numbers definitely don't lie. Being in the position now and seeing what was projected at that time. Um, if I were to fast forward to college, I did think the CCNA course was going to be a little different, taking it again in college, but it was the same Netacad curriculum, a few additions, right? CCNA kind of updates and adds some new features or just refreshing the material every so often. But it was really the same material I had gone through in college. I realized that the consistency really helps you retain that information. And in high school, I was a little too naive to read the chapter twice, but even upon trying to skim through, I was doing every activity, every quiz that they had, every packet tracer. It does help you solidify those fundamentals and to really understand the foundation of the information that they're trying to deliver. So even with skimming, right? If you stop for every activity and every packet tracer, every quiz, you could definitely take in the information in full, and that's what I was able to understand. So when I did miss something on a quiz, could just go back, right, and look at that chapter for the context and really understand, what brought me to that moment of missing it. In college, one of my favorite moments was when we got to the subnetting lesson. I was able to see my colleagues, right? They were classmates. I was able to see them struggling, with learning subnetting, and I had already been through that same exact struggle. I was just happy enough that I was comfortable with the lesson to subnet in my head and really understand it, which I think we all know teaching subnetting to someone and understanding it enough to subnet in your head still completely different. There's a bit of a skill gap there in trying to take that into effect. So just going through Netacad, me having went through it twice, that definitely prepared me for my internship experience. I did a co-op at the Cisco Kalo lab. It was called Kalo at the time, which is the Customer Advocacy Lab Operations Lab. They now call it CX for Customer Experience. And in that lab, we focused on creating recreates for TAC engineers that were at Cisco, and we would then pass them off to them so they could run configurations and tests and just further reproduce the customer's issue so they could have a different perspective to troubleshoot it. It was a really big lab. I like to say it's the size of a Best Buy, right? Maybe 30, 34 racks of equipment with two sides, about 10 to 12 racks on each side, and they were double-sided in the rows. A lot of equipment, very loud, but it gave me a lot of hands-on experience of running device connections and understanding compatibility between some parts and even firmware compatibility. It's a lot of experience that tech engineers don't really get. So I'm really grateful for that time that I did spend in the Kalo lab, called the CX lab, and just thinking about the interview. It was with the duty manager of the Kalo lab and the director of the Kalo lab, and they asked me some really simple questions thinking back on it now, but they weren't the easiest at that time, right? Still kind of new and fresh to the information. Um, I can't say I was new. That was my second time going through the curriculum, but just being confident that you know that information. What's the difference between a router and a switch? What's a default gateway? How do two computers communicate with each other, right? These are actually pretty simple questions, and I was able to answer them to get the co-op position, but it shows that you have that foundational knowledge. Uh, Following that co-op experience and just kind of finishing out college afterwards, I was able to be at that co-op for a good 6 to 8 months. So that was a nice span of time, still taking some classes and still continuing on with my degree. I was also able to then get a Meraki internship in my last junior, senior year of college, which took me out to San Francisco performing really what seemed like the same role that the Meraki NSEs were doing. I was doing the similar email cases to them, helping customers with configuration assistance and isolating the problem in their network, but I wasn't really taking calls like the full-time engineers do. My journey took me through really a year and a half of internships before I was able to get my full-time network engineer role. And that journey does look different for each person. It is important to just take an understanding of how it led up to that goal, right? The journey is just as important as the goal. Netacad was still pretty early in the rollout when my high school was going through it and offering the class. If you're not a bibliophile, a large book of information can really turn you away. If you haven't done a lot of self-study in the past, right? Not all of us are diligent at self-study, and I am definitely a procrastinator. It happens, right? But it's understanding, those times that you are procrastinating to take advantage of that. I think Netacad really brings this information into a digestible format, and that's something I also try to do for my team today, being their manager when we think about team discussions and features that we're offering and just understanding, explaining DHCP or wireless and how a client can successfully connect. We much more digestible if we can whiteboard that instead of just kind of doing it in such of a lecture format. Um, the format change, right, really helps us understand the material more. And I have to give credit to my instructor. She really painted the picture for how my career could shape uh, within Netacad, going through the CCNA material and actually becoming a network engineer. As an instructor myself, right, I understand that painting that professional picture, that career picture, and also trying to, as I mentioned, provide different options of format for the material, right? Thinking about Netacad and what it offers us, the packet tracer, the activities, just taking the time to whiteboard something really helps deliver that information. Thinking about what helps me and trying to help anyone that may be struggling in that point of understanding why you should learn this material, why you should try to give it so much thought as you're going into it. Really think about what you value in life. Do you value career growth or helping people, connecting the world, maybe it's simplifying technology, or maybe you just value the money, right? I think you really have to consider what you value in life and use that to fuel your passion. That's Think about it, right? That if that's fueling your passion, it's fueling why you want to actually learn the material. Sometimes it can get dry. I definitely agree on that front. But when we can return to what we value, we return to what makes us passionate, then we have that fuel, that fire to really keep us going and keep us moving along. So definitely read as much as you can of the material. The way it's formatted now, I've been through previous CCNA material in Netacad. It is a very easy read, right? They make it so concise. Don't skip it, right? Do all the activities, do all the quizzes, and do the packet tracers, and really tap into your instructor and listen to them as they try to help you paint what the future of your career could look like, and help you paint a better understanding of this Netacad material and how it's presented. The opportunities and the information that my instructor shared with me really helped me frame what was possible for my future. So even taking that further, make it real for yourself. Maybe that looks like researching available network engineer roles to read the descriptions and understand the pay ranges, or maybe even just going further to expand your network, talking to some of the recruiters that are recruiting for those roles, and just understanding the differences and similarities that they speak about, whether it's company culture or just your responsibilities of being in that role. It's good to know what you're going to get into as you're jumping into it. Well, thank you for listening here, and I hope you all have a great day.